A boy went back to Napoli.
There is a face covered in dust and tears eyes carrying something no school could ever teach. When that scene appears on screen, the audience thinks they are watching acting. But they do not know that is a real memory of Sophia Loren. She grew up in war, knew what hunger felt like, watched her world being torn apart. And then, that same woman became the most photographed face on the planet, stepped into Hollywood, won an Oscar, and lived under lights the whole world dreamed of. And yet, as admiration surrounded her and her performances became immortal, Sophia Loren's private life was exposed under the harshest gaze of the public. A marriage that once shocked public opinion, a prison cell miscarriages before she could become a mother, and in her later years, a serious fall that forced a body that once ruled the screen to face the unforgiving cruelty of time. Even more painful, that cost did not stop with her. It spread to her two sons, who grew up under the overwhelming shadow of a legend carrying losses most of the world has never known. This is not just the story of Sophia Loren. This is the story of the price an entire family had to pay for fame. A poor childhood and a doomed love. Pozzuoli, a small town near Naples, was not glamorous, not charming, and its people were once deeply poor. Yet here, among bombed ruins and air raid sirens, a star was born in 1934 with the name Sophia Villani Ciccolone. She was the child neighbors called illegitimate. Her mother, Ramilda Villani, 22, unmarried and alone. Her father, Riccardo Ciccolone, a failed engineer who later drifted into working for the national railway system. Loren's childhood was defined by a constant struggle to survive even after the war ended, when food and shelter were still scarce. Her father was almost entirely absent from her life. He was the man who abandoned her mother and his two daughters when Loren was still a child. Sophia grew up thin, so thin that neighborhood children called her Stato, meaning little stick. She was also called Lasticadenti, meaning toothpick. Children are never delicate, and they are not kind. She was pale, angular, and hungry enough that other children could see it and use it to mock her. To escape the hardships her family and so many others were enduring, Loren turned to the cinema. During air raids, Loren found refuge in movie theaters in Pozzuoli, places that truly helped her escape the brutality of daily life during World War II and the intense hunger. Actresses like Rita Hayworth and Greta Garbo, in their on-screen glamour, planted the seed of pursuing acting in Sophia Loren's mind. At 15, Loren won a beauty contest in 1950, earning the money she needed to move to Rome and begin pursuing a career in the film industry. And it was there that Sophia caught the attention of people connected to Italian cinema. More dangerously, she caught the attention of a 37-year-old film producer named Carlo Ponti. Ponti was not a handsome man. He was short, had a large nose, and carried the kind of presence money amplifies but cannot replace. Yet he was extremely powerful in the Italian film world, truly intelligent, and by almost every professional account possessed an exceptional eye for talent. When he saw Sophia in Rome that summer, he immediately understood that what he was looking at was not just a beautiful girl, it was a career, perhaps even a phenomenon. He arranged a screen test for her. She was given small roles in low-budget productions. Though the pay was only enough for her and her mother to get by, it gave her something priceless: experience in front of the camera and a growing understanding of how to use her face. Under Ponti's urging, she also changed her name. Sophia Ciccolone became Sophia Loren to move internationally faster, and Ponti offered her a 7-year contract to star in his films. That contract did not just begin a professional partnership, but also a turbulent love affair. From 1950 to 1954, Sophia appeared in more than a dozen Italian films, from comedies to dramas to large-scale historical productions. By 1955, Sophia Loren was the most talked-about actress in Europe. The Italian film industry gave her the tools she needed, and she used them with discipline and intelligence that surprised those who believed beauty could replace effort. It was not until 1960 when director Vittorio De Sica gave her the lead role in La Ciociara, known in English as Two Women. This was not a glamorous role. It did not serve her existing image. It was the story of a mother in wartime Italy trying to protect her daughter. And it forced her to strip away every layer of the goddess image to find the woman underneath. What she did with that role did not just change her career, it changed how the world understood her true ability. And the recognition that followed came exactly when everything else in her life began to fracture. Bigamy accusations, the price of love. Going back to 1950 at a beauty contest that opened the door to Sophia Loren's destiny. That year, she did not win the biggest crown, but she was one of the most striking faces in the finals associated with the title Miss Elegance in the Miss Italia system. And the greatest prize Sophia took from that competition was not the title. It was sitting on the judges' panel. That was Carlo Ponti. He was 37. She was only 15 or 16. From that moment, not just a love story began, but an entire life was pulled in a different direction. The irony was that Ponti already had a wife and 2 children, and Italy at the time was still tightly bound by Catholic law to the point that divorce was almost a locked door. But the age gap and the shadow of an existing family were not the biggest obstacles. The real shock came when Cary Grant appeared. This was no longer a passing distraction, but the intervention of a Hollywood legend at the exact moment the story between Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti had not yet settled. Later in her memoir, Loren confirmed that Cary wrote to her, pursued her intensely, and that feeling was not empty rumor. He proposed during the filming of The Pride and the Passion. At that time, Loren was only 22 or 23, while Cary Grant was 52, and in another marriage. In front of Sophia were not just 2 men. They were 2 worlds. One was glamorous Hollywood, the other was the man who had shaped her life from the beginning. Loren did not deny she had feelings for Cary Grant. She admired him, saw him as both an idol and a mentor. And that is exactly why the choice was so difficult. When Cary formally proposed, Sophia had to split her heart in half and choose one side. And she chose. Later, she said clearly Cary belonged to a different world in America, and she did not believe she could truly fit into it. That answer sounds calm, but underneath it was a brutal decision. In the end, she returned to her first choice, not because Cary was not enough, but because Carlo ran deeper. In 1957, Ponti obtained a divorce through Mexico and married Sophia Loren by proxy in Juarez. But what Mexican law opened Italian law shut down. That marriage quickly turned into a legal minefield. It led to bigamy accusations, public scrutiny, and turned their private lives into something dissected like a criminal case. In 1962, the marriage was annulled. Then Ponti went through France. The 2 obtained French citizenship. He finalized the divorce under French law, and on April 9, 1966, they were finally legally married in Paris. The accusations were eventually dropped, but the price was years of instability, being viewed like criminals in public, and the deeply personal humiliation of having one's life placed on a legal scale. Beautiful photos do not capture that part. Then, in the 1960s, just when the marriage finally seemed to find solid ground, another tragedy struck. Sophia Loren suffered 2 miscarriages before becoming a mother. There was a time she truly believed she would never have children. For her, this was not just biological loss. It was a direct blow to her deepest dream, because she grew up in the void left by an absent father and always longed for a complete family. But that era left little room for a star to publicly grieve miscarriage. People expected her to remain beautiful, remain radiant, step in front of the camera as if nothing inside had broken. And according to later accounts, there were moments when she was close to despair, The story of how Sophia Loren eventually became a mother, how she had to lie still, endure fear, and protect her pregnancy to reach the day of giving birth, is in fact one of the quietest yet most heroic chapters of her life. But before reaching that victory, she had to pass through condemned love, a marriage placed on trial by public opinion, and losses that could not be fully displayed under the lights. And in that sense, Carlo Ponti was not just her husband. He was the compensation life threw her after a deprived childhood. That man, 22 years older than her, did not just give Sophia Ciccoloni a marriage that lasted decades. He was the architect who took a fragile girl from a poor post-war town and redesigned her into Sophia Loren, a symbol that neither Italian cinema nor the world could ignore. Breaking through in Hollywood without accepting cosmetic surgery. Fame was never a gentle gift for Sophia Loren. From the very moment she became famous in Italy and then spread across the world, she also became the target of cruel stares, vicious judgments, and forms of hurt far beyond the ordinary pressure a celebrity is expected to endure. The Italian press had a very particular relationship with her, but it was never truly gentle. They raised her up like a national treasure, then on the very next page brought her down, mocked her, or tried to shrink her as if she needed to be pulled lower so others could accept her more easily. What made that more painful was that it did not just target her career. It targeted who she was. Sophia's origins were always dragged out like a malicious reminder. She was not born into a distinguished family. She was born out of wedlock. She came from the South, from Poti, from poverty. And for part of Italian society, it seemed that no amount of glory, no number of golden statues, and no number of years of dedication would ever be enough to erase that background. The way people wrote about her almost always followed a cruel pattern. The story of Sophia Loren was never allowed to be only a story about talent or artistic labor. It was always pulled off course toward her body, her roots, her marriage, her money, and that bitter suspicion that somehow she had received more than she deserved. That was not just scrutiny. It was a deep kind of emotional erosion, the feeling of being cut open again and again as if the world would never allow her to exist fully within her own dignity. From her earliest days in the profession, Sophia Loren had to learn how to stand upright in the middle of those cuts. At screen tests, there were cinematographers who told her outright that if she wanted to succeed, she should get cosmetic surgery on her nose and mouth. That was not just a cold professional suggestion. For a young girl rising out of deprivation, insecurity, and years of being called a toothpick and looked at like a child who was not pretty enough, those words had the power to wound very deeply. It was like people were looking straight at her face and telling her that who she was now still was not enough, that she could only be accepted if she agreed to cut away part of herself. Fortunately, she did not listen. She kept that face exactly as it was kept the features that had once been judged too strong, too sharp, too far outside the standard. And with that pride, she proved all of them wrong. But what matters is that this victory did not come easily. It was paid for with a great deal of hurt, a great deal of doubt, and many moments when she had to gather up her self-respect again in a world always ready to tell her she had never been enough. That is why the fact that Sophia Loren ultimately became the most successful Italian actress of all time was not just a professional achievement. It was also the painful victory of a woman who had to pass through rejection, contempt, and very heavy emotional wounds without allowing them to break her. The painful price. Carlo Ponti Jr. and Edoardo Ponti did not grow up like two rich boys raised by flashbulbs. They were the sons of Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti, one of the most powerful but also most heavily scrutinized couples in Italian cinema. Carlo Jr. was born on December 29, 1968, in Geneva. Edoardo was born on January 6, 1973, also in Geneva. The simple fact that they carried the Ponti name and were Sophia Loren's sons was enough for the public to view them through a lens already prepared in advance, children of a legend, children of a marriage that once caused a storm. Children of a family the press never agreed to leave alone. What is notable is that at home, at least according to Eduardo, the atmosphere was not lived as some royal court of stars. He said that growing up he did not see his parents as a powerhouse couple. In his eyes, they looked like working people, craftsmen who lived for their work more than for glamour. This detail matters because it shows that the two brothers were not raised in a world of showy privilege, but in an environment where fame existed, yet professional discipline ruled. That is why their pressure did not come from being forced to become famous at all costs. It came from the fact that no matter how privately they lived, the world still looked at them first as an extension of Sophia Loren. Carlo Jr. was the one who most clearly chose to step away from the Hollywood orbit. He entered classical music, became a conductor, and later founded the Los Angeles Virtuosi Orchestra. This is not a path that easily attracts mass public attention, but it was a very clear way to build a separate identity outside cinema, outside the shadow of the most famous mother in the family. Eduardo went in the opposite direction. He went straight into film, became a director and screenwriter, then turned into a direct collaborator with his mother on projects like Human Voice, and especially The Life Ahead. One man stepped into another field to avoid the blinding spotlight. The other walked straight into that light and accepted being compared. What they had to endure was not a chain of loud personal scandals. What weighed more was the invisible pressure of their background. In a statement published on Sophia Loren's official website, the family emphasized that their mother taught them to be strong, to be proud, to rise above prejudice, and to build an identity not based on other people's approval. That says a great deal. It shows they grew up with the awareness that their name would always bring outside judgment with it. Not everyone looked at them as two independent individuals. Many people saw them as Sophia Loren's sons, and from there assumed they were privileged that their road had been prepared for them, or that they had to carry the full troubled history of their parents. For Eduardo, that pressure became most visible when working with his mother. Interviews about The Life Ahead always put the mother-son relationship at the center, almost making it impossible to separate him from the label Sophia Loren's son. In other words, every professional step Eduardo took risked being read as borrowed from family glow. And Carlo Jr., though followed less closely by the press, never truly escaped that frame either. His music career was often mentioned as Sophia Loren's son becomes a conductor instead of simply a conductor standing on his own. That is the quiet tragedy of these two sons. They were not scandalous. They did not fall apart yet. For almost their entire lives, they had to search for a separate identity while the world kept calling them by their mother's name first. The tax scandal years under siege. In Sophia Loren's full scandal record, the tax case is the chapter that brought the silver screen goddess crashing hardest back to earth. This was no longer rumor, nor some vague media war. It was a real legal case with a real sentence, a real prison date, real figures, and so much complexity that even decades later, people still confuse it with another dispute. If you do not separate it clearly, it is very easy to tell it wrong. And that confusion is exactly what makes this case dangerous. Because on the surface, many people think Sophia Loren had only one tax evasion case stretching across 40 years. In reality, there are at least two different cases here later mixed together by the press into one mess. The first case is the one that led directly to the prison sentence in 1982. According to a UPI report published at the time, Sophia Loren was arrested and taken to prison to serve 30 days for failing to pay 112 million lire in additional taxes related to film income from 1963 and 1964. UPI converted that amount at the time to about $180,000. On top of the additional taxes, the court also ordered her to pay 5 million lire in fines. In simple terms, this was not some minor shortfall being blown out of proportion. In press coverage at the time, it was presented as a serious enough financial obligation to send an international star to jail. What made this story heavier was that Sophia Loren was not dragged into prison under dramatic escort like in a movie. She returned to Italy on her own to serve the sentence. This is an important detail because it shows she knew she had no way around it anymore. After years of living between Switzerland, France, and international film sets, she came back to face a sentence she herself always considered unjust. The Guardian later recalled very clearly that she actually spent 17 days in prison under the 30-day sentence, and when she walked out of jail in 1982, she was surrounded by crowds of reporters and fans. That image was painfully bitter. A star who had once represented the beauty and glory of Italy was now stepping out of a prison like a defendant who had paid the price for her own name. But this is where the easiest confusion begins. Some later sources, especially summary pieces from 2013, mention that the 1980 conviction involved an inaccurate tax return for 1970, in which income had been underreported by about 5 million lire. The Independent even summarized it by saying she once went to prison after admitting she had underreported income by about 5 million lire. So from that point on, later media began mixing two different kinds of figures into one case on one side. 5 million lire underreported on the other, 112 million lire, in additional taxes that authorities said she had to pay. Put bluntly, many later articles told this case by lumping everything together, making readers think 5 million lire was the total damage in the 1982 case. It was not. One figure belonged to the reporting side, the other belonged to the taxes and financial obligations being recovered. Sophia Loren always kept a fairly consistent position on this case. She did not present herself as someone who deliberately cheated with a calculating mind. The Guardian recorded that when she left prison, she said the sentence was unjust and that the fault lay with the accountant who had mishandled her tax records. This is a very notable point in her portrait. Sophia Loren did not handle this crisis by disappearing completely, nor did she confess in a broken, collapsing way. She stood in a position that was half defensive, half enduring. She served the sentence, but did not accept the moral story the public wanted to impose on her. And that is why this tax case followed her for so long. Because it did not close with one clear confession, but with the feeling that the legal system, accounting, and the press had together turned a star's financial private life into a public scar. Then came the second case, the one many people think was a continuation of the prison case, but in fact was a separate dispute. In 2013, Italy's Supreme Court ruled in Sophia Loren's favor in a nearly 40-year battle over how taxes should be calculated on her 1974 income. The Guardian wrote very clearly that the heart of this case was not whether she had hidden money, but whether 60% or 70% of that year's income should be taxable. Loren's accountant said she only had to pay on 60%. The tax authorities wanted to push it to 70%. It sounds dry, but that dryness matters, because it shows this was not some reversal, where in the end she was declared fully innocent in the old tax evasion case. No. This was another battle about a different year, a different formula, and a much more technical type of dispute. The figures in the 2013 case also have to be handled with a cool head. A Reuters reprint stated that the disputed income amounted to about 276,000 euros, or about $381,300 at the exchange rate used in that article. The Independent explained it using the language of the old liar Sophia Loren had paid 552 million lire, corresponding to 60% of the income she declared, while the tax authorities argued she should have been subject to the higher 70% rate. This part is extremely important for anyone writing a script, because if you tell it wrong, the audience will think Sophia Loren hid hundreds of thousands of euros and only cleared her name 40 years later. The reality of the 2013 case is a dispute about how to calculate the taxable share of income, not some late discovery of a hidden pile of money. So, if you want to speak accurately about this case, you have to lock down 3 layers very clearly. Layer 1. Sophia Loren truly went to prison in 1982. The sentence was 30 days. She actually served 17 days. And the press at the time cited $112 million in additional taxes plus $5 million in fines. Layer 2 figures like $5 million underreported, or the reference points 1963 to 1964-1970 are part of why this case has been told in overlapping ways across the years. Layer 3, the 2013 victory, was a different case centered on 1974 income and the question of whether 60% or 70% was the taxable portion. One side is the stain of prison. The other is a long, technical legal battle. The moment you merge those two into one, it is wrong. And perhaps the most bitter part of the whole story lies here. Sophia Loren did not collapse because of a love scandal or one reckless personal downfall. She was nailed into public memory by cold numbers. A star of emotion, beauty, and cinema was brought down by tax statements, income percentages, and legal documents stretching across nearly an entire lifetime. That is the most brutal part of this story. Not loud like an affair, not dramatic like a professional collapse. Just a legal system that was slow, stubborn, and cold, powerful enough to cling to an icon for decades. What that goddess carried with her. There is a version of Sophia Loren's story that is nothing but victory. The girl from Pozzuoli goes straight into Hollywood, the Oscar-winning actress, the beauty who outlived almost every face of her era. That version is not false. It is just too clean. The full version has to include the hunger, real hunger of the body, the kind that leaves its mark on the nervous system. It has to include the father who never came, the mother with unfinished dreams, both a gift and a burden, the man she loved but who was never completely hers alone, the children she lost before she could even hold them in her arms, the bigamy accusations, the prison cell, a press system that raised her up as a goddess and tore her apart in the same breath. What she built on top of those ruins, not to erase them, but to stack directly over them while everything underneath remained intact, is something the word career almost sounds too light for. She made more than 100 films across 7 decades. She worked with Vittorio De Sica, Federico Fellini, Charlie Chaplin, Robert Altman, and Rob Marshall. She acted in 5 languages. She won an Oscar, a BAFTA, a Grammy, multiple David di Donatello Awards, an honorary Oscar for Lifetime Achievement in 1991, and another competitive Oscar nomination in 1964 for Marriage Italian Style. She also raised 2 sons who, by everything known so far, are decent, thoughtful, and capable men. Considering where she started and what she had to go through, that is no small thing. There is something worth pausing on for a long time in the durability of this woman. She did not reach the top and then rot. She did not burst into flame once and then collapse. She did not dissolve into comfort bitterness or the quiet decay that has broken so many people who touched the height she reached while still barely past 20. At an age when most performers had long since left the stage, she was still taking roles, still appearing, still bringing to her work the same intelligence and strict preparation, almost exactly what she had carried with her since 1950, in a studio in Rome when Carlo Ponti was still standing on the other side of the room watching. In 2020, at 86, she starred in The Life Ahead, a film directed by her son Eduardo, playing a Holocaust survivor, running a shelter for the children of street prostitutes in southern Italy. The role demanded that she age, tire, soften, harden, and become alive in ways that had nothing to do with beauty anymore. And she did all of it. Many critics who had grown up with that face on their parents' television sets were genuinely stunned by what they saw. Not a legend replaying her own legacy, but an actor truly working. But perhaps the most important detail lies somewhere else. Through all those years, she never completely lost the little girl from Pozzuoli. She kept that voice. She returned to Naples again and again, returned to the food, the people, the sounds, the warmth, and the hard-worn beauty of the place that made her. When she spoke about who she really was, she did not name Hollywood first. She did not name Cannes or the Oscars first either. She named her grandmother's kitchen. She named the smell of the sea in Pozzuoli. She named the very particular light of southern Italy on a street from her childhood. That goddess was always a performance, no matter how extraordinary a performance it was. But the woman underneath it, the one who survived bombs and hunger, the father who never came, the pain of losing children, she never got to hold the humiliation of a prison cell. That woman was the part that was not a performance. She, not the glow, was what made that performance possible. Sophia Loren turned 90 in September 2024. She remains one of the most recognizable living faces in the world. And as throughout her whole life, she still carries far more than the camera ever had time to capture. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss many more compelling stories.
This content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Thoughtfully compiled from public archives, historical records, and classic articles. While we strive for accuracy and balanced storytelling, some details from Hollywood's golden age remain unconfirmed and should be treated as speculative. We encourage viewers to draw their own independent conclusions. If this journey through Hollywood's shadows resonated with you, please leave a gentle like and subscribe with the bell icon so you never miss our next chapter. To continue uncovering the forgotten tragedies of the Golden Age, simply select the video on your screen right now. Thank you for keeping their memories alive.